I voted because I wanted to see a change in America.
I vote because I firmly believe as Muslims we have a responsibility to be productive, contributing members of our society.
I voted because I live in an important political state where my vote could determine the winner of an election.
The reason why I voted is so that I could try and help my nation become a better nation.
We have a luxury that not everybody in the world has. That is the ability to vote and select who our representatives are going to be.
It's important to remember that change requires participation from all levels, and every vote has a power to impact our future.
Many people who do not vote are the same people who also do not like having Islam.
It's crucial that we come together and let our voices be heard.
Remember to vote in Georgia Senate's runoff elections.
Salam, everyone. Welcome and greetings to our first ever vote-a-thon. My name is Munir McJohnny. I am your host for tonight. I am a local activist and commercial real estate agent, and I'm so excited to be here with all of you today. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Before we begin, in the spirit of social justice and recognizing the history of Indigenous peoples, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we're all speaking from ancestral lands of Cherokee and Muskogee tribes in Atlanta area. We believe that it is part of our responsibility to acknowledge the ongoing harm that is done to the Indigenous people on the lands and working towards a society that is more equitable and keeping with our Muslim ethics. I'm again so excited to be here with two wonderful organizations, CAIR and the Georgia Muslim Voter Project. Georgia Muslim Voter Project, or GAMVP, is an American Muslims to amplify their voices through the votes. GAMVP encourages Muslims in Georgia to register to vote, show up to the polls, and increase voter turnout in elections through voter education, registration drives, and grassroots organizing. CAIR, or the Georgia Council for American Islamic Relations, also known as CAIR, is America's largest Muslim civil liberties and advocacy organization. Its mission is to enhance understanding of Islam, protect civil rights, promote justice, and empower American Muslims. And it's so important that we have these organizations. My journey in the political realm started about 6 years ago when a close friend of mine told me that she was running for the Georgia House of Representatives. And not knowing much about politics, I thought she was running for US Congress. And my response was, oh my God, you're moving to DC, you're gonna represent Georgia in DC? And she eventually explained to me that Georgia had its own set of House and Senate. And I'm a fairly well-educated individual. I went to a good high school, a good college, and I just had no idea that Georgia has its own representation. So I called up a lot of friends because I wanted to see if this was a lone case where I slept through the class or if this was something that we hadn't learned. And unfortunately, I found that this isn't a coincidence that we don't know about these things. It's very strategic. And it's so important to have local organizations like CAIR and GAMVP who are doing this work to not only amplify our voices, but also educate our communities about what's going on and the policies that impact us so much every single day. It's thanks to our forefathers who came here as immigrants, as people of color, and really made so many sacrifices that we are able to do what we do today. It's thanks to them worrying about food, water, and shelter that we're able to take it to the next step and now have a seat at the table. And sometimes we have to pull up our own seats, and that's okay. And that's why I'm so grateful for these organizations. But to make sure that these organizations can continue, it's important that people like us continue to invest in them, volunteer with them, amplify their message, share their social media, and of course, invest in them financially as well. I always recommend people to do an 80-20 split. If you're looking to invest in the Georgia Senate runoff, donate 80% of your money to these local grassroots organizations. These organizations are going to continue to be here to invest in our communities, to make sure that our communities are heard and to represent our communities, to make sure that we have a seat at the table and that we are heard loud and clear. So I urge you throughout the day and throughout this evening, as you feel so called, please look at the links in your chats and make sure that you invest whatever you can. We'd also love to hear from you. Where are you from? Where are you hearing us from? And what's important to you? Please feel free to share in whatever chat boxes that you are in. Now, I'm really excited to introduce your two moderators for tonight, Shafina Kabani and Murtaza Khwaja. Shafina is the Executive Director of the Georgia Muslim Voter Project, or GAMVP, and Murtaza is the Legal and Policy Director at CAIR-Georgia. Thank you all so much and enjoy your evening.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm Murtaza Khwaja. I'm the Legal and Policy Director at CAIR-Georgia, and I'm really thrilled and honored to have with me.
I'm Shafina Kabani, the Executive Director of the Georgia Muslim Voter Project.
And we, as our incredible host Munir Meghani said, we are going to be your moderators for tonight's evening. We're so thankful to have Munir on board as well for this event, and you all are going to be hearing from him later on in the evening as well. But thank you to the Georgia Muslim community. Thank you all for joining us tonight. We're so incredibly excited for tonight's event. This is really a long time coming, and it's been an initiative that both our teams, both at CAIR-Georgia and the Georgia Muslim Voter Project, have put together. CAIR-Georgia, as Munir mentioned, is the Georgia chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations, which is our nation's largest Muslim civil rights group. We promote, advocate, and defend for the civil rights and liberties of American Muslims, and extension, all Americans. And Shafina, you can explain Georgia Muslim Voter Project even better. I'm so thrilled to have you here with me.
Absolutely. And Munir kind of touched on it, but basically the mission of Georgia Muslim Voter Project is to elevate the voices of our diverse Muslim communities here in Georgia. And we do that through voter registration, voter education, and also encouraging civic participation beyond the vote.
And because of the incredible work that Georgia Muslim Voter Project has been doing on the ground, we've seen historic levels of registration and turnout in the Muslim community. Seeing this and also understanding the need in the 2020 election for Muslims, and especially Georgia Muslims, to have a voice, Georgia Muslim Voter Project and CAIR-Georgia launched a joint Get Out to Vote initiative called the CAIR to Vote Initiative. Now, many of you have heard a lot about this initiative, so I'm just going to go over it briefly, but we launched this back during the general election cycle. This initiative had two facets. One was the practical, where we wanted to make sure everyone was being registered to vote. Everyone applied for an absentee ballot and mailed it if they were able to, or put it in a drop box if they were able to. And if they weren't able to vote early, we made sure that they had a voter action plan to make sure they voted in person. And the second, which was equally important, was the educational facet, which was educating the Georgia Muslim community on the issues surrounding the election, some vogue election issues, and also the issues that are most important to the Georgia Muslim community, like coronavirus relief legislation, immigrant rights, and criminal justice reform. So we had a host of webinars, many of which I'm sure a lot of you joined in on. And alhamdulillah, we saw great, it was very effective throughout the entirety of the initiative. Shafina can actually talk a little bit more about some of the more specifics and the actual numbers we saw from that initiative. Shafina.
Absolutely. So starting in September 2020, GAMVP and CAIR-Georgia focused on mobilizing and educating low propensity Muslim voters in Georgia. Through the hard work and dedication of our staff and volunteers, we saw significant success. And we're going to share some of those numbers with you on this screen. Staff and volunteers sent over 100,000 texts, made over 6,000 phone calls, and shared dozens of voter plans over more than 430 hours of service. We're proud of the work we've done and continue to do for the upcoming runoff elections. And I'm going to let Murtaza explain phase 2 of the elections and tell you a little bit more about the runoffs. Murtaza, I think you're on mute.
Thanks for that, Shafina. We knew that's going to happen at least once this evening. It's probably going to happen again. So thankfully, we have friends to call us out for it. But Shafina, thank you so much for sharing those numbers with us. This is the impact. These are real numbers. These are real conversations we had with you, the Georgia Muslim community. But our work is not done. The election happened. The results were announced. We have now a new president, incoming president, President-elect Joe Biden, Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, and an entirely new administration. However, in Georgia, because no single senatorial candidate got a majority, which is to say no single senatorial candidate got 50+1% of the vote, it is automatically goes into a runoff by Georgia law. The two highest vote getters, which in this case, for both Senate races, on one side, it was Raphael Warnock, Reverend Warnock, and on the other, on that ticket was Senator Kelly Loeffler. And on the other side, it was Senator Perdue and John Ossoff, who were the top two vote getters. So those are the two runoffs we're in. And that's why we launched phase 2 of this Care to Vote initiative in 2020. Phase 2, we're going to be doing many of the same things we did in phase 1, which is phone banking, text banking, making sure we reach out to the Georgia Muslim community and have the conversations with Georgia Muslims about what issues matter most to them, and making sure you're most informed about where to go vote, when to go vote, and how to vote. In addition to that, one of the initiatives of that is this vote-a-thon, where we have an incredible list of speakers that are going to be speaking to us today. We're really excited about all of them. And even more than that, beyond just the vote-a-thon, and beyond just the text banking and phone banking, we're really excited about launching our door-to-door field team in the upcoming week. So you're going to have field staff that are wearing PPE, adhering to CDC guidelines and regulations, visiting you door-to-door, letting you know, again, where to vote, how to vote, informing you about the issues that matter most, and also letting you know about the work that CAIR-Georgia and the Georgia Muslim Voter Project are doing in this realm.
And there are some key dates that we want to remind you of for the election. So early voting actually starts tomorrow, December 14th. And we like to say that the election doesn't actually happen on election day, January 5th. The election is happening right now. So you can go vote early in person or vote by absentee ballot. If you're filling out an absentee ballot, we recommend dropping them in your local county drop box rather than mailing them in. But if you do have to mail it in, we suggest getting those in the mail by December 21st to make sure that your vote counts. We're also going to share links to some voter resources on the screen. You can visit gamvp.org/absentee to request your absentee ballot and find your county Dropbox locations. Go to gamvp.org/vote, and you can use the tool from our partners at Branch Politics to pull up detailed information on the candidates and their views. And you can also visit your My Voter page on the Secretary of State Georgia website to check your registration status, absentee ballot status, and to find your polling location and times.
And thanks again, Shafina. You're really bringing up all the actual specific information. And I think one of the things that I want to highlight most is we are on the eve of the beginning of early voting, and it's not by accident. We wanted to make sure that we energize and inform the Georgia Muslim community right at the perfect time. And you can make your voices heard as early as tomorrow. You can apply for an absentee ballot today if you'd like. But this vote-a-thon now, I want to get a little bit into the gritty about what this vote-a-thon is going to look like. Like I said earlier, we have an incredible lineup of speakers. I do want to state very clearly and unequivocally that we are both 501c3 organizations. We are nonpartisan. We are not endorsing any single candidate. We are not endorsing any single position. What we are doing is encouraging the Georgia Muslim community to inform themselves about their candidates and about the issues surrounding the election. So when they do go to vote, because we're also encouraging you to actually go and vote, you make the most informed decision at the polls. I will do this. I will repeat this again and again throughout the evening. Our guests have been given a pre-prepared set of questions, which they're going to stick to in terms of their responses. So we're making sure that there are no blurred lines here. We are nonpartisan. We're not endorsing any candidate. Whichever candidate is elected, whether it's Senator Loeffler, Senator Perdue, or Warnock, or Reverend Warnock, or John Ossoff, or any combination of those, we are going to be committed to working with them for the Georgia Muslim community. We've already worked with Senator Perdue's office because he is our senator, just like we did for Senator Isaacson's office when he was our senator as well. So CAIR-Georgia is a nonpartisan, just like Georgia Muslim Voter Project, and we are not endorsing any single candidate. Our aim is solely to educate, empower, and mobilize you, the Georgia Muslim community, as a strong electorate, and make sure that your voice is heard. Shafina, did you want to add anything on that? I know I spoke for both of us here, but I know that we share a lot of the same thoughts there.
You said that eloquently, so you took the words right out of my mouth.
Great. So this vote-a-thon is ready to kick off. Let's officially move towards our guests and their important messages for you, the Georgia Muslim community, and the incredible conversation we have geared up tonight. Our first speaker for the night is Brother Nihad Awad. Nihad Awad is the executive director and founder of the Council on American Islamic Relations, the largest Muslim civil rights and advocacy organization in the United States. In 1994, he co-founded CAIR in Washington, D.C., which serves as his national headquarters and since has grown to 34 chapter offices nationwide, including CAIR-Georgia. He's been recognized amongst the 20 most influential civil rights leaders who are shaping struggles in our nation. In addition to his position at CAIR, he's a passionate community organizer who actively works with local and national interfaith leaders and organizations in the interest of promoting positive relations amongst people of different faith backgrounds. Brother Nihad, I'm thrilled to have you here with us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Murtaza, and thank you, Shafina. MashaAllah, great show.
Wa alaikum assalam. Brother Nihad and I have had the pleasure of going on quite a few civil rights retreats with him, meeting him at different CAIR events, and I'm very thankful and fortunate to count him not just as a colleague, but also as a friend. So Brother Nihad, thank you so much again for joining us. So as we kick off our event, Brother Nihad, I know CAIR National has been doing some really incredible work. So can you just give us an overview of CAIR National's efforts for voter turnout this election? And if they were different than past elections, why did we see more of a concerted effort in this election?
Everybody recognized that this is a historic election, and every eligible voter should register to vote on time and vote their conscience. And from the beginning of this year, we have put a lot of resources at the national level and also at the local level. We granted chapters like CAIR-Georgia and others even some funding from the headquarters to enable them and facilitate their efforts to register Muslims to vote, to educate Muslim voters on the issues and candidates. And we issued a voter guide that was distributed nationally. And obviously, like Shafina and everyone in so many states, alhamdulillah, we have mobilized the American Muslim community to be involved in the early election and vote early, and also mobilize them through robocalls. I remember CAIR alone sent so many robocalls to 500,000 Muslim voters alone. Totally, I would say probably one or a little bit more than 1 million Muslim voters were engaged in this election. We surveyed the Muslim voters nationwide, as we have been doing this for so many years, to showcase what issues they care about and where they lean, because it's important for us to understand where the Muslim community stands on issues, for the media and also candidates to know how and how much they need to work with the Muslim community. On the night of the election, November 3rd, we conducted an exit poll, and the exit poll showed where the majority of the Muslim community where they voted, and the turnout was extremely high. 84% is a historic record for American Muslim voters. So I'm very, very proud of our community and all our partners in Georgia and all the states, especially the swing states that were so critical for this election.
And you might have touched on this a little bit already, but in 2020, what has been the Muslim impact at the national level and in terms of the total voter turnout?
The Muslim impact was significant on this particular election, especially in the swing states. This was recognized by media and candidates themselves, both at the local and national level. The fact that 84% of American Muslims voted, as I said, more than 1 million voters is a high turnout. 69% of American Muslim voters who were surveyed on November 3rd said that they voted for Biden, 17% voted for Trump, and 11% declined to express their opinion on where they voted. I think the Muslim community played a major role in Georgia, in Arizona, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. Luckily, the Muslim community has a high concentration, and they understood that this is an important election for them. And you can see the trend was very evident that the minority voters were the margin of victory in all these swing states.
Thank you so much, Brother Nihad. Our last question for you is, given, I think, the points you've brought up very eloquently about swing states and Muslim voters' impact, given that there are at least 70,000 registered Georgia Muslim voters, and we know the importance of this election, can you kind of talk about the magnitude of the moment for Georgia Muslims and the Georgia Muslim community, given that the stakes are so high and that the vote, at least in the general election, was so close?
We're trying, as you said, you and Shafina, that nonprofit 501c3 organizations, that's known. So we need to stay within that frame. But also let me add that this is not just any regular runoff elections. This is a historic, important election. It's not about only 2 seats in the U.S. Senate. It is about who will get the majority of the U.S. Senate. Whoever is in the majority of the U.S. Senate will decide the direction of this country for the next 4 years. Will be in control of the agenda, the policies of how this country will be run for the next 4 years. So not only the nation, the world is looking at Georgia and voters in Georgia, what they will do. So this is of historic, epic importance. And secondly, there's so much around us. We experience so much injustice. And there is a reason why the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, when you see evil, change it with your hand. If you cannot, change it with your tongue. And if you cannot, deny it with your heart. Look, there is a reason why he said this, because there are so many tools that you can change and you can confront injustice. For so many and long time, many of us could not do or say anything, but through the votes, you can express yourself. You cannot just deny it in your heart. You cannot just hate the injustice. No, there is more than that you can do. Vote and encourage other people to vote early on and also on the day of the election. If there is election Shafina, quick question. So on the 5th of January, there will be no election, or there will be no voting? I think there will be, right?
There will be, yes. We hope to encourage people to vote early if they can.
So look, in my final remarks here, we should stand up for what's right. And we should stand up with the minorities for so long time. And the African American community should not fight bigotry and racism by itself. They are part of us. We are part of them. The immigrants who have been, mistreated. We need justice for them. We need immigrants to be respected, to feel at home, and all of these things cannot be done unless we have the right people in the right position. And the Muslim community, like all voters, they put the right people in authority. So finally, do your best. Don't just vote. Encourage other people to vote. Help them volunteer. And all of us are waiting and praying for you to succeed in your strive to stand up for justice and help our communities and our nation.
Thank you so much, Brother Nihad. We appreciate your thoughts and all the work that CAIR is doing, both on a local and national level.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next special guest is Representative Rashida Tlaib, joining us from Michigan. I'm really excited to have you here today. Congresswoman Tlaib was born and raised in Southwest Detroit, the proud daughter of Palestinian immigrant parents and the oldest of 14 siblings. Congresswoman Tlaib was the first in her family to attend college and put herself through law school while working at nonprofit and social justice organizations. The Congresswoman made history in 2008 by becoming the first Muslim woman to ever serve in the Michigan legislature. In 2018, Representative Tlaib was elected to represent Michigan's 13th congressional district, which includes much of the city of Detroit and several Wayne County communities. The 13th district re-elected her in 2020. Thank you for being here today, and congratulations on your recent electoral win.
Representative, I think you're on mute. We knew it was going to happen again.
I just shouted, Assalamu alaikum, Georgia. Thank you all so much. I just am so incredibly proud that you all are just doing this and recognizing the significant importance of our voices collectively rising during this really important time in our country. I know you're going to hear a lot of people tell you so much about the importance of this, and I know you're going to ask me some questions, but one thing I just want to reiterate first before we open up for that. In mashallah, like one of the things that I've learned from my team, including Russia and many of the folks on my team that helped me really connect with my residents, is we always try to imagine what we want to feel the day after the election. Like, yeah, I mean, what do we want to be thinking about the day after election? I want to be able to say to folks, we did everything possible. I want to be able to look and say, mashallah, Georgia Muslims came out 20% higher. I want to be able to say to kids, see, bullies don't win, that if we all rise up together, we're able to, again, have a collective voice that makes a difference in people's lives. And so I just hope you all realize the significance. Yes, the nation is watching, but I also hope you realize like just the opportunity here that Allah has given us to show the power of Muslims in Georgia. And just collectively, like, hey, we're here. I want people to be like, oh my God, I didn't even know Muslims are in Georgia. Exactly. Because we're going to show them in drove of numbers. So inshallah, I'm so incredibly excited about this. And you know, you all know in the Quran it says you have to raise your hand for good. I feel like every time we vote, we raise our hand, we're showing up for our neighbors, that we have to think beyond just names on the ballot. Think of our values, think of the mission that it's about, of the fact that we in this country, no matter our income, no matter our background, we have this right that we come in and we vote, and it's equal. It's equal to anybody, no matter, again, income or status, ethnicity, or any of those issues. So as you can tell, I'm super excited. But I know the moderators and everyone has some questions for me, but I hope this is contagious, because I wish I lived in Georgia right now just for this moment, because I feel like you all have this opportunity that has just been given, and almost like in a gift that has been given to all of you to represent the Muslim community nationally. So I hope we succeed, inshallah.
Absolutely. I love it. And yes, your energy is absolutely contagious. I can feel it coming through, and I'm sure everyone else can too. So thank you for that. So we do have a few questions for you today. And so my first question comes in two parts. You have extensive experience in Michigan over 2 election cycles. Is there a history of voter suppression in Michigan? And if so, what are some local efforts to combat it? And did you observe any differences between your 2 elections?
Yeah, I think it's important to know it's national. I think the people that look like us, of different ethnicities, we are a target. And they're going to look at areas like ours where there might be a high number of folks with names that look like ours. I know here in Michigan, we have a high concentration, mashallah, of Muslims in certain areas. And we had folks specifically target one particular polling location that has a huge Yemeni community. And you wonder, like, what is going on there? I mean, many of them are UAW workers, Ford workers came to the country for this dream of a better opportunity for their families. And so there's huge concentration in the Yemeni community. And I know they challenge, oh, there's a hyphen in the name, but it's not on the ID, when we all know it's that person. And also, challenging folks that English is their second language. So we knew they became a target. So what we did, alhamdulillah, very organized way, was recruit some of our, mashallah, lawyers within our community to volunteer, to make sure that they're there at the forefront and making sure to push back against any of that voter suppression that you might see at at polling locations and people challenging ballots. So I would urge all of us to recruit people that look like us, that understand our community. And I remember being there, and I wasn't a candidate at the time, and I had volunteered as a lawyer to work specifically in a predominantly Arab American speaking polling location. I mean, probably 80% Arabic speaking polling location, and you know, stood there and watched as folks were being challenged. And I, alhamdulillah, was there, and I pushed back and I said, nope, that's their name, their address. Yes, it's missing a hyphen, as you know, in our community, sometimes with multiple names. And then really just said, okay, well, go file a complaint later, but this person's vote's going to count right now. You can challenge it later. So I think it's really important that we all recruit folks that look like us, and making sure that us as a community is targeting those specific voting locations that we know will become a target for those that don't want people that look like us voting.
To sort of expound on that a little bit, because I think you hit it the nail right on the head, that a lot of the times it's because our elected officials and those conducting elections don't look like us and aren't reflective of our communities. And we, like you said, it's a national effort. These voter suppression tactics are going on nationally, particularly in the South. Georgia's been ground zero of those efforts. We've kind of covered that in other webinars. But like you said, we've had opportunities to address some of this. So when we do address it, what we see is our communities being able to have greater representation and greater engagement. So what for you, Congresswoman, do you think is one of the most important results you've seen from minority communities having this increase in civic engagement with this combating of these suppression tactics?
Yeah, I think, you know, in our community, and I've seen this, I mean, I grew up in this beautiful masjid in that community where that polling location is. And mashallah, we grew it. We, you know, invested so much time and energy. And, you know, there was Quran school, and there was Arabic school, and there was all this amazing programming there for our young people to stay connected to our faith. I think we need to spend as much of those resources and time and energy into capacity to address this issue, which really impact us. And as you all know, it's not just the Muslim ban, it's even just the fact that they even considered banning. I mean, what does that say to the American people? People like us, where all of a sudden, even after the Muslim ban, I kept hearing from doctors in our community that said that patients didn't want them being seen by them. And I heard all these other kinds of, you know, upsetting kind of culture that was being created, that somehow, you know, this othering, even though, again, it may have not directly impacted some of us, it impacted the way people saw us. And so I just hope, and brother, you know this, I want to spend as much, inshallah, money on civic engagement, things like this, where we're recruiting our own people to oversee our votes. We're recruiting our own people, educating our neighbors about the importance of voting. And I know, like, as a daughter of Palestinian immigrant mother, who I went as a little girl, translated the ballot with her, helped her vote each time. And now I'm teaching my neighbors, you can take, especially my Latino neighbors, I'm like, you can actually take your child with you. You can take somebody with you to translate. That is legally allowed. And they're like, I didn't know that. And so it is important, again, to invest that time and money really towards building capacity, again, for us to have a machine ready to protect our vote equally, again, against others. And you see that more, you know, what is happening in the Black community. We saw that with the NAACP at the forefront here in Michigan. And I know in the South, they're really putting a lot of time and energy there. We need to do that as well with our Muslim vote.
Absolutely. You know, and I love the anecdote about, taking your child to the poll to translate the ballot for you. It's all about getting those resources, getting that knowledge, letting everyone know what they need to know when they go to the poll, so that, you know, they can make those informed decisions. So appreciate that. Any last messages to Georgia Muslims as they head into the runoffs?
You know, I know, I'm a corny person, which I'm very, just a very passionate person, as you know. Some people will dismiss it as aggressive. It's not. It's because I feel like a lot of us have been waiting for a long time to be seen. And I get emotional about this because even as a journalist asked me this time around, he said, Rashida, people are like, this is great, you're there. We're going to be able to repeal the Muslim ban, inshallah. We're going to be able to do all these things, you know, make sure that CVA and this kind of like legalizing spying on our community and all these things that we've seen happen. You know, again, people not understanding how that is connected to how we're seen by our neighbors, these policies. You know, he asked me, you know, Rashida, like, what do you hope for? And I said, you know, his name was Ali. And I said, Ali, I'm be honest with you. You know, I ran to really take on pollution, take on poverty, really help the community that raised me here in Michigan. And I realize more now than ever that I'm knocking down the barriers of the next Muslimah, who won't have to deal with the kind of hate, who won't have to deal with the fact that the institution in itself wasn't ready for someone like me. And I get emotional about it because I got to tell you, it was a tsunami of hate that came towards myself and Sister Ilhan. And I want you to know our mere existence is already shaking folks. And I want to stress to you all, our existence is going to come out in our votes. I want to, mashallah, be able to say, look at the voting in these precincts. And guess what? It was the Muslim vote that delivered Georgia. I would desperately want to see that. And if anything, we will truly be seen. It's not just that they're going to treat us like ATMs, which many candidates do and many folks do. They're not going to just come to us once a year. They're going to understand that for them to win in a close race, they're going to have to. And again, I know it's nonpartisan, but again, no matter when you vote, they don't know who you vote for. But the fact that you can show this huge trend of increase of Muslim votes, that is showing up for our neighbors. That to me is like extra points, I promise you. And Allah, and I know people kind of horsey, but it is because small, mashallah, like what is happening in our country right now, this form of darkness and hate is something that our faith is always asking us to push back. We are taught always, after we take care of our home and our family, we are taught this, that we have to take care of the community we live in. When you vote, you're taking care of the community you live in. And so I just hope, inshallah, I see the headlines and that it may have been close, but it was the Muslim vote in these precincts that delivered it. And so I just, inshallah, like I get excited thinking about it. I hope you all do. Keep pushing. Don't be surprised. And sister, you know this. Work your block. I got to tell you, I'm the eldest of 14, so there's a voting block, but they are all married now. They got kids. I got a couple nieces and a nephew. They're in the voting age. If I don't text, stalk them, call them, pick them up, help them fill out the application for absentee, whatever it is, they will not vote. You, if you're involved right now and you're talking and you're hearing me right now, I know you're that person in your family. So I'm asking you to organize your voting block. Get 20 people. I promise you, the next day you're going to be like, I got 20 people in my family, my network, the people I work with, the people I pray with, I got them to vote. And I promise you, they're waiting for us to ask them, not a candidate, not a partisan organization. They're asking us, the people they trust, to get them out to vote. So inshallah khair, inshallah. And thank you all so much for being at the forefront and really pushing this. And I'm here for you all. Let me know what else I can do. I'm going to send out robocalls, inshallah. I'm going to encourage people and to understand. And if anything, if you are less than 18 and you're listening to me, you better get your mother and father out and your uncles and aunties and everybody. You got to push them. I don't care if you need to tell them, you want me to go to college and become a doctor? Well, I need you to create a world where I can be safe in being a doctor in this world. So I need you to go out there and do more. And that means voting. So thank you all so much. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah, alhamdulillah. Thank you. What powerful words and what a powerful message to leave us with, Congresswoman. Thank you so much for joining us. We're getting comments about just the energy you brought, the Palestine sign in the background, the plant that's thriving, alhamdulillah.
That's fake. Oh, it's fake. It's so fake. Oh. But this is my father and my mother on their wedding day. And I want you all to know how beautiful this message is. My mother only had 8th grade education when she came to this country. My father, 4th grade. And they got to see their daughter become a United States Congresswoman. I want us to pave the way so that it's even easier for more of us. This is why we're here, is for this world where we can be able to change people's lives for the better. And that's what, at the end, in Judgment Day, that's where people are going to look to, is what did we do to make our world better and people's lives better? So inshallah khair. So thank you all so much. I really, really appreciate it.
Inshallah. Alhamdulillah, you've been such an incredible representative for us, for the Muslim community, and inspiring, dignified, against really horrible attacks. And you're really a beacon of strength and hope for all of us. So Jazakallah for all your work. And we know you've been fighting on this front, but us in Georgia have the same concerns that everyone in the country right now does, which is we want to see substantial coronavirus relief legislation, not something that's lip service and a watered down compromise that doesn't get money to those who need it most, those people that are actually suffering. So we know you're going to continue the work there. Jazakallah for your efforts so far.
Take care, everyone. Salam alaikum. Let's do it, Georgia.
Inshallah. Wow, what an amazing message. I'm thrilled to have been able to, be a part of this conversation. I know all of you are as well. Next, I'm incredibly excited to introduce our next guest, representing the Georgia Asian American community and one of our closest coalition partners, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Esther Lim. E is born and raised in Atlanta and began organizing in Atlanta's AAPI communities in 2015 during an internship with Asian Americans Advancing Justice. They continued to organize around housing and racial justice on campus before graduating from NYU with a BA in Systems of Power and Inequality in the United States. Afterward, E worked on electoral and issue campaigns in New York, Philadelphia, Miami, Boston, and Muncie before returning to Georgia in 2017 to build power with the immigrant communities that raised E. E is representing Asian Americans for Advancing Justice today. E and I are actually friends as well, so I'm very grateful to have her and all our other friends on as well. E, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we're really excited, not only for you joining us, but also the incredible work we've been seeing and that's being highlighted that Asian Americans Advancing Justice Atlanta has been doing. Organizations like Asian Americans Advancing Justice have been working tirelessly, not just in this election cycle, but for a long time, for many election cycles, for many years, on local voter mobilization. And I'd love if you could share with our viewers, the Muslim community, because the Muslim community is a significant portion of the Asian American population. If you could just share some of the numbers and trends you've seen amongst the Asian American community and amongst Asian American voters.
Yeah, of course. So for the last 10 or so years, we've seen a pretty consistent drop in turnout, but not necessarily because the Asian American voters weren't coming out to vote, but specifically because they were actually getting registered at a faster rate than were actually going out to vote, right? So the vote was constantly growing, but this year is the first in quite some time where we're actually seeing a growth in turnout in addition to voter registration rates, right? So we saw 186,000 AAPI votes cast this year, 80,000 of which were first-time voters, the vast majority of whom actually cast their ballots before even election day, right? So this is actually more than twice as much as 2016 and 2012. So that was incredibly exciting for us to see. And then on top of that, like if we take it all the way back to 2004, when I was actually growing up here, the Secretary of State reported that there were only about 21,000 votes from the AAPI community. So that's insane. That is literally just over a tenth of where we're at now. So.
And we'd love if you could speak specifically on the emergence and acknowledgement of Asian Americans as an important voting bloc, especially here in Georgia. What would you say are the most notable successes, and what are you most excited to see for the Asian American community?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest successes, just like by the numbers, would probably just be the fact that our registration rate is so insanely high now, right? So many people are so much more civically engaged than they were even just 5 years ago. We're seeing more and more AAPI electeds, Muslim electeds, candidates, activists, particularly in like younger folks, right? Which is very promising for the future. We won language access into CAB, which is practically unheard of in Georgia. We're seeing national attention, like you'd mentioned, about AAPI turnout because it was that astounding this year. And all of this came from decades of grassroots and community organizing that we poured into this, despite basically pretty much everybody in the nation telling us that this wasn't possible or that it was a lost cause. So that feels particularly good. And I would say more personally, you know, these are my people. Like I grew up in this community and I get to see it be part of Southern history, which is super exciting because I get to see like my brown and yellow friends and family y'all included, be part of like the same damn histories that so many of our movement ancestors built for us, right? Like we get to be part of that. And in terms of what I'm excited for next for our electorate is, you know, I'm just excited to see it bud even more in these next few decades, you know, to grow into the vibrant, principled, and uniquely Southern political powerhouse that I know we can be. And I'm also very excited to see in language ballots before the next major election.
For sure. The last thing I kind of wanted to end with, because I think a lot of our viewers are of the immigrant community. A lot of them are from the Asian American community. So are there any commonalities that you've seen specifically with Muslim American or Asian Americans with the broader Asian community? Or are there some differences too with that you've seen, that some particular challenges with the Muslim Asian American community as opposed, or are there more commonalities that you see?
I mean, I think it's like you said earlier, like the two are really not separate. There's a huge portion of the Asian American community that is Muslim, right? You know, we have Indian, Bengali, Pakistani, even some East Asian communities that identify as Muslim. So there is that piece, right? But at the same time, Asian Americans are not a monolith, right? We have very varied experiences. We may share cultural similarities here and there. But it's important to note that a lot of us experience politics and life very differently. That being said, you know, we do share a lot of similar struggles. You know, there's like the immigrant experience, especially in these last 4 years, being afraid of what's going to happen to your friends and family who might be undocumented, or what's going to happen to the rising cost of being naturalized, right? Or what's going to happen to family immigration, because that's how a lot of our family members got here, right? And then there's also just, you know, language access is a really, really big piece of being able to be involved and invested in your community and in local politics and national politics and all of that, right? Like it is very, very difficult, especially in the South, to engage in a substantive way if you don't speak English. So language access is a huge piece. There's also healthcare, cost of education. You know, you want to be able to send your kids to a good school, a cost of living, and stressing about, you know, whether everything you've built in the last couple of decades, your livelihood, your kids, all of that is going to survive the pandemic, right? So we share a lot of these struggles too. And more importantly than that, like because we share so many struggles, our freedom and our peace are inherently bound up in one another, which is also why I'm seeing so many of us come together and build collective power that's not just going to transform the world, not like just for only one of our groups, but for all of us. So yeah, lots of commonalities.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think the Georgia Muslim Voter Project shares a space with you all. So it's great to be in a same space and to work together towards those common goals. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. And thank you so much for all the work that you do.
Thank y'all.
Thanks so much. We loved having you.
So next, I'd like to introduce you to Sister Dalia Mogahed. Sister Dalia is the Director of Research at the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, where she leads the organization's pioneering research and thought leadership programs on American Muslims. Dalia is the former executive director of the Gallup Center for Muslim Studies, where she led the analysis of surveys of Muslim communities worldwide. She co-authored the book, Who Speaks for Islam? What a Billion Muslims Really Think. President Barack Obama appointed her to the President's Advisory Council on Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships in 2009. Sister Dalia, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We'd love to talk about trends in American Muslim civic engagement over time and what those trends mean. Can you share some facts and figures about American Muslim voters from recent years, and what are the trends indicating for American Muslims?
So there's been some really positive trends over the past 5 years. So I serve as the executive director, or the research director of the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding. And what we've done over the past 5 years is conduct a nationwide scientific survey of American Muslims, as well as Americans of other faiths and no faiths. And so we're able to actually track what has changed over the past 5 years. And one of the most exciting changes is the increase of voter registration, or another way to look at it is that the percentage of Muslims who are not registered has gone down by half. So it used to be 39% of American Muslims who were eligible to register to vote in 2016 were not registered. And that number has gone down to 21%. So we have seen an amazing uptick in voter registration and a willingness to vote.
Sorry, I was on mute again. I was trying to figure out how to get off mute. So one of the terms that I've heard a lot in this world, and something that I think we might have touched upon it, Dalia and CAIR-Georgia had a meeting a few days ago, so it's great to have you back on and to speak with you again. Who are Inshallah voters? And why should we be concerned about the Inshallah voters, especially with the stats that you just shared with us?
So great question. We found this group of people in our research that were telling us, on one hand, they were not registered to vote, but they intended to vote. So there was this gap of, about 20 to 25% of American Muslim voters who said they intended to vote in the next election, but were not registered to vote. And so we gave them a name. This group that wanted to vote but hadn't taken action were called the Inshallah voter. And there was this gap between registration and intention to vote of nearly a quarter of Muslims. And that number went down to only about 2% in 2020. So from 2016 to 2020, we saw this huge decrease in the percentage of people who wanted to vote but were not registered. And that's great news. What it says is that all the wonderful activism that's been going on, that's tried to get people who wanted to vote but hadn't gotten around to it, gave them a convenient way to register to vote, that has worked. So the Inshallah voter has been made to vote. Inshallah, it happened. God willed it, and so they were registered. The problem now is with the other, say 15% of Muslims who are eligible to vote who are not registered and do not want to become registered, do not intend to vote. This is really the next kind of struggle we have to deal with. This is the next challenge that we have to overcome.
Absolutely. And in your research, what benefits of increased civic participation have you observed for American Muslims?
So there's a number of things that we've seen in terms of civic engagement that go beyond voting. And so we looked at a number of other activities that people could take part in that go beyond simply casting their vote. One being volunteering for a political campaign. Another is contributing financially to a political campaign. And then the third we looked at if someone attended a town hall. And what we found is that in almost all three of these categories, American Muslims were more likely than the general public to be doing these things. So although the percentage of American Muslims who are eligible to vote and are registered is lower than other faith communities, still behind, even with the increase over the past 5 years, we are actually ahead in some of these other things that take more effort. So volunteering for a political campaign, 20% of American Muslims say that they've done this. That's huge. It's a huge number compared to the general public, which was actually significantly lower. In fact, American Muslims and American Jews were the same in that regard, and more likely than other Americans of different faiths. So I think that that's good news. It means that there is a significant, critical mass of American Muslims that is quite engaged and deeply engaged, but there still remains a large number, perhaps about the same percentage, that don't even want to vote, don't even want to register. And so you see this spectrum within the Muslim community of incredible engagement, but also a lot of disenchantment with the system.
Absolutely. Any final messages for the Georgia Muslim community, Georgia Muslim organizers, Georgia Muslim groups for the upcoming runoff elections?
I mean, my message to all of you is get out and vote at this runoff election. You are determining literally the future of our country with your state, with your vote. Your vote matters. Your vote counts. This vote is going to be decided by maybe hundreds of votes, not even thousands. So what you do and what you decide to do that day on election day is going to determine the future of our country. And we're all counting on you. Okay. So don't let us down. Get out and vote. Bring your friend, bring your neighbor, bring your grandmother. Make sure everyone gets out there.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all the important work that you do and for sharing it with us here today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Next, we have Rizwan Manji. Rizwan can be seen as Ray Butani on the critically acclaimed CBC pop TV show Schitt's Creek, which dominated the 2020 Emmy race, sweeping all 15 nominations, including Best Comedy. Rizwan is perhaps best known for playing Rajiv Gidwani, the hysterically officious, scheming assistant manager of a call center in the NBC comedy Outsourced, and I absolutely love that show. His other film and TV credits include The Magicians, Mr. Robot, Arrested Development, Charlie Wilson's War, The Tiger Hunter, Patterson, and The Man Who Killed Hitler, and then The Bigfoot, working alongside Sam Elliott and Ron Livingston. Rizwan uses his platform to elevate civic participation within South Asian and Muslim communities. Thank you for being with us here today.
Thank you. Oh my, I didn't get a text that I was next. Thank God I was sitting here because I wasn't out. Anyways, hello, assalamu alaikum. Kushali Mubarak to all these smileys on because it's Kushali today. So anyway, hi, I'm here. I'm a little frazzled, but I'm here. So
we're excited. I do think we were going to send you a little text to let you know you were.
I was walking away and then I'm like, Rizwan Manji, that sounds like a familiar name. That's me. I guess I should be sitting here. So, hi.
We're just trying to keep you on your toes.
Okay.
Well, Rizwan, tell us about what motivates you personally to be civically engaged and to be an active voter.
Okay. So, first of all, I'm Canadian. I've been living here for a really long time. So I can't vote. I have a green card, so I can't vote. But I have 3 children who are citizens of the United States, and they can't vote either. So I have decided, this is the way that I can sort of, my platform, I can, get people to come out and vote and get engaged and do all that stuff. The first thing that I remember being, realizing that my voice actually meant something and people actually cared what I was saying was when this whole Lowe's thing happened, which I don't know if you guys remember, but it was a while back. It was about they had this thing where Lowe's removed their ads from All American Muslim, which was a show. They said, oh, it's making Muslim people look normal. And they said, we're going to remove our ads. So me and my friend Pravesh, who's not Muslim, we were just off Outsourced and we're like, hey, why don't we do something? Because this is crazy. And so we made this Lowe's video and it got all these views, and it got written up in all these things. They're saying, hey, people are listening to us. This is kind of cool. So let's do this. So that's what sort of, how I got into it. And also now that I have kids, it's the reason I'm still doing it. So I hope that answers your question. I'm still a little frazzled. So I'm still hoping that this makes sense.
It absolutely does.
Rizwan, I'm a little frazzled too, and it's because Shafina didn't.
I know you're having trouble getting off mute, which happens to me a lot. So I'm glad I figured that out as well. So
it's one of the toughest parts. But for me, is Shafina didn't bring up really my favorite work of yours, which is the cult classic from the early 2000s or late 90s, American Desi.
Oh yes, American Desi.
And the reason why I wanted to bring that up in particular, I think for me, growing up, as it was for a whole generation of American Desis, was that was a very formational and seminal film, because that was one of the first times we saw ourselves normalize a normal American Desi experience, where it's not in your face that we're Desi. It's just part of the movie, but it's really just a regular love, coming of age story or whatnot, or coming to grips with your culture in a way that we haven't seen in media, and we continue, unfortunately, not to see in media that way. And I think that that's why a lot of people have this attachment to the film. And to make the analogy here now, in politics, we see a similar thing where people are meant to feel that they're not included or they're not acknowledged. And it's very much done intentionally. So I wanted to ask you not just why representation matters and your feelings about representation, but why specific type of representation that's actually reflective of the community. Like, for example, American Desi was written, produced, and directed by Desis.
Yeah.
So that matters, that they were the ones telling their story. So why does, I do want to hear your thoughts on representation, but specific to that, this type of reflective representation?
It's so important. Thank you for asking that question. There was a study, and I'm sure other people have mentioned it, but it was really shocking to me that in America, again, I'm Canadian, but in America, they said, I don't know what the percentage was, about people who specifically either they do not know or they think they don't know a Muslim person in their lives. So their only representation of what a Muslim person is what they see on TV. So that to me was very eye-opening, because when you see stuff like Homeland and all that stuff that you're constantly bombarded with, and that's your only representation, you can't fault them, because that's all they're seeing. So to me, it made it very important and to realize that this representation matters, and also start to produce things. Like that's where my new level of involvement is I want to start producing stuff that has Muslim characters that are shown, like that are people like us, like the three of us, where you're not seeing if you're only seeing what like Homeland and 24 and all that stuff, then that's what you're going to do. So I felt like it's kind of our responsibility now. Let's get it out there. We have a platform. Let's start producing stuff. Because again, it shouldn't just be something like American Desi that happened 20 years ago. It can't only be that. It has to be stuff that's happening now. And we're getting there. There is stuff happening. So I think that there's definitely a positive transformation, but we got to be better. So I'm trying, and I think that there's a lot of people along with me that are also trying. We need to get it out there.
Yeah. And just to speak on Murtaza's behalf, he has been speaking nonstop about this movie for a few days now, so I'm glad he was able to get that.
We were going to have an intro song to you, Pen Masala Zab Jaisa Koi, to when you walked in. I got vetoed. I'm still all about it.
Why did it happen? Why did then I would have I would have heard it anywhere, and I would have ran in, and it was so great. I'm sad for you that you didn't win that.
So speaking on representation, can you speak to how voter engagement from minority communities and showing up in government might impact or support representation in other parts of society?
Oh, she wanted to come and say hi.
Hello.
Say hi. She was going to help me with my why I'm doing this, the first question. And then because we didn't know we were coming on, she didn't get a chance. Now she's here, so she wants to say hi. You want to say hi?
Hi. Hello.
Everybody in Georgia to vote. All the Muslims in Georgia to vote. Oh, now you don't want to talk.
Should they vote? Should everyone in Georgia vote?
Yeah.
All right, you have to ask me, simplify that question again, because I totally got lost.
You're fine.
I'm taking too much time. Isn't there somebody else? We probably need to go.
Just quickly, how does representation in government impact or support representation in other parts of society?
Well, look, it's simple, right? Our voice matters. So representation anywhere, it just sort of, it one thing feeds into another, and there's so many parallels, like you were saying, with media. The representation matters there because it translates to other things. So in a simple matter, it matters because it one thing leads into another. That sort of happened in my life as well. Like I said with the Lowe's video, one thing sort of leads to another thing. So we need to, I don't know. I got completely bombarded.
I got you.
No, that's 100% fair. The last thing I think that I wanted to ask you then is, given that I think you mentioned this as well, that we need to continue having this type of representation. I think you, and along with a lot of other South Asian, a lot of other Muslim actors, there's work being done in this space. So in terms of your plans, what would you like to see? If you could produce something or direct something tomorrow, what would you want it to be? What story would you want to tell?
So we are in the process. I'm producing a show with Broadway Video, which is Lorne Michaels' company. And we are trying, there was one time somebody, it might have been Katie Couric, where she said she wants to see the Muslim Cosby Show. I know we can't say Cosby anymore, but that's what she had said. And to me, I think that's where I would like to be. That's what I want. What I want to see on TV is something that says, you know what, this is us. We're not saints, but we have lives, and we have children, and we have we have our own problems, and we have our own. Just to have a normal story about us would be something that would make me happy, and that's what I think I'm leaning towards.
That's amazing. And if we can do we can do the spin-off version of A Different World. And
yes.
And if you're looking for people, I know an attorney who could turn to an actor very quickly.
Oh, all right. Let's do it.
Well, thank you again so much for joining us, for sharing your story, for sharing your family, your daughter with us as well.
Thank you.
So now we move on to our next guest. I'm also incredibly excited for this one. A local leader of the Georgia Muslim community who I know very well, unfortunately, Imam Sulaimaan Hamid. Imam Sulaimaan Hamid serves as the resident Imam of the Atlanta Masjid Al-Islam, one of my favorite masjids to go to. It's one of the largest Islamic centers in the Southeast. Imam Sulaimaan is passionate about the improvement of Islamic institutions of education. He's noted as a respected leader in the Muslim American community, and he's often called upon to assist with programs establishing a commitment to religion for future generations. In addition to being a published author, he's also a community organizer. Assalamu alaikum, Imam Sulaimaan. Thank you so much for joining us.
Wa alaikum assalam, my brother Mutazar, my sister Shafina. How are you both?
Alhamdulillah, we're doing well. Being incredibly inspired by all these speakers, and I know we have some more inspiration coming.
Absolutely, me too.
So Imam Sulaimaan, I'm also very impressed with the library behind you. I just wanted to note that as well. Alhamdulillah. Great text.
My wife told me to make it look a little bit more organized, so she gets the credit.
So we'll give her the credit. But let's make the case for locals to be involved in all elections. For our audience who may not be aware, can you explain what is at stake at the local level for Georgians in the runoffs and why it is important to vote? I know your masjid and you in particular have spoken quite at length about this.
Yes. Bismillah. That's a very important question. I think just Muslims in general maybe don't know what a runoff is, and maybe need to go Google that first, and understanding that, a candidate doesn't get enough votes. Here's a second chance for them to actually qualify to gain control of whatever they're running for. As far as this particular runoff, also understand what your senator does. We have these Senate seats, right? Senators in charge of the whole state, your whole state. And what's at stake, I think is the way it was said, is that what's at stake is the Congress, which is the other side, just, you know, being, what is it? I don't think it's a, just being opposed to whatever this next president and is going to do. We saw that with President Barack Obama. They sat on their hands, they didn't do anything. And so who's going to be in control of the Senate has a lot to do with this particular runoff. So if we actually want progress in our country, that's what's at stake. But particularly with our state, you know, having progress and who will be in control of the Congress, this particular runoff can change that we have 2 seats that are in this particular runoff. So it's very important. And then we have another candidate, Daniel Blackman, I think his name is. It's actually 3 in our Georgia runoff. So we should be aware of all 3 of those. But it's really the progress of our country is what's at stake and who will be in charge of our Senate.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing up the third race, because I think that the Senate races are really obviously in the limelight, but you know, like our organizations are very local focused, so making sure people know about the Public Service Commissioner race as well is very important. So for our next question, what are specific challenges for Black Muslim voters in Georgia, and why has voter participation been low in the past?
I think one particular challenge for African American voters, Black voters, is that we've historically experienced the dark side of our government, whether that's been us as Black people, African Americans, and then as Muslims, you get the double whammy, right? And so, you know, it's been low because we refuse to be taken for granted. You know, you all may have seen that particular interview that the president-elect did with Charlemagne and said, you know, you're not Black if you don't vote for me. That's a little spicy language, you know, and to just expect Black folks to vote for you, you know, that's or to be taken for granted. Sometimes, you know, I might hold my vote back because if you think you're going to take me for granted. But then I want to add to that, it's actually been a little bit higher, particularly since President Obama, you know, and they know the value of the African American vote. So it's been both ways. But the low, I think, would be because folks are not to be taken for granted. And then the challenge is, you know, we know the government is not as shiny as they present themselves to be. Okay, is that politically correct to say on this broadcast?
The political correctness of that we're not policing what people say. We will just all continue to repeat that we are
representative anyway for CAIR. So if I say something messed up, I got you guys on the line anyway, so I'm okay.
No, I think our viewers appreciate that. You know, we have some great speakers with great, you know, insights, and we're very thankful to hear yours. To that front, I think you brought up an incredible point earlier about the Black vote being suppressed for a variety of reasons. I don't know if you use the word suppression, but I think that's what you were alluding to, is there's been active efforts to suppress votes, particularly in the South. And what that means, and what we've seen court cases say, federal courts have said this, that there's been surgical precision to remove Black voters off the list. So with that being said, I think Georgia organizations like CAIR, Georgia Muslim Voter Project, Fair Fight, New Georgia Project have done an incredible job in re-registering people and getting people registered. This last election, only 2% of people who were eligible to be registered were not. So alhamdulillah, due to the great work of activists like yourself and many of our other speakers, we've been able to counteract that. But what do local faith organizations such as Masjid Al-Islam plan to do to counter any of these efforts and encourage voters in the future?
I'll take it one step in front of that before we get to those folks. It's actually helping Muslims understand we can vote. You know, that's still a challenge that we have as a faith community of folks seeing the ethical challenge or the moral challenge. Should I support this Kafir government? I'm going to give you some even more spicy language, right? And having us understand the reality of, as citizens of this country, Muslim Americans, and I'm putting the faith first, that we have an obligation to be control of our environment, to be in control of our country. And the mechanism that that's used in our particular situation is politics, right? So that's first. So what we intend to do and have been doing is helping us understand it's okay to be civically engaged, to engage in that particular mechanism of our society. And then as far as the suppression and the like, what I am saying as an Imam of the Atlanta Masjid Al-Islam, as a faith leader in our community, support Georgia Muslim Voters Project. That's number one. And support CAIR-Georgia. What you all are doing is, it makes it so easy for me. I was talking to my sister Salima Suswell, who works with the organization. All we need you all to do is give us our marching orders, right? That we as faith leaders will do our part to ensure that we're supporting the excellent works that you all have put in place. And my colleague, Imam Abdullah Jabir also. So what we intend to do is make sure that you all know we have your backs. We wait for the marching orders that you all give us, and we'll be there to rally the troops. But making sure that the community knows voting, and I'm not going to go as far as to say it's an obligation in the faith side, but as citizens, yes, as citizens, we should be engaged in taking control of our environment, taking control of our community. And so we'll be doing that together, inshallah, with the great work that your two organizations have been leading.
We appreciate that so much. Thank you so much for being here tonight and for shedding some light on local concerns.
Thank you for having me. Assalamu alaikum.
Next up, we have a sister activist who needs no introduction. Sister Linda Sarsour is an award-winning racial justice and civil rights activist, community organizer, every Islamophobe's worst nightmare, and the mother of three. She is a Palestinian Muslim American born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. She's the former executive director of the Arab American Association of New York and the co-founder of the first Muslim online organizing platform, Empower Change. Sister Linda was one of the national co-chairs of the largest single-day protest in U.S. history, the Women's March on Washington. She recently released her highly anticipated book, We Are Not Here to Be Bystanders, a memoir of love and resistance. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Sorry, I was yelling at people who I live with in this house because I was like, we're trying to have a panel here.
You're absolutely, it's life. You're absolutely fine. So Sister Linda, because of the range of social justice work, we want to talk about civic engagement beyond the vote. We've been discussing the importance of voting to ensure we have good leadership in place. How do we hold elected officials accountable once we voted them in?
I really appreciate that question. It's the most important part. It's actually more important than the voting part. We seem to do the step one, which is register to vote. We do sometimes even the step two, which is you go to vote, and then that's it, and we end it there. Many of you know that's what I do for a living. I hold elected officials accountable to our communities. That is the actual semblance of real power. To make sure that the very people that you put in office remember that they work for you. One of the things I've noticed about our Muslim American communities, and I've been around the country, is oftentimes you'll see Muslims in spaces with governors and Congress people and city council people and all different levels of office, and they're so happy to be in their presence. They're like, you know, oh my God, like they're just, it's almost like as if they're just around celebrities. And in my mind, when I'm around people who are in elected office, I'm like, I'm their boss. These people work for me. And that's the mentality that I have that I hope more people understand. And it's our taxpayer dollars that pay the salaries of these elected officials. And their whole job is to ensure that their constituents have health care, have access to transportation, have a way to thrive and be able to live in dignity and in respect in their communities. That's literally the whole job of an elected official, is to represent the will of the people. And so I hope that our communities understand that once you vote for somebody, that that's actually the beginning and not the end. And holding accountable means making calls to our elected officials and when they do the wrong thing and letting them know that they did the wrong thing. But you also have to call them when they do the right thing. thank them when they make the right votes, you know, showing up at their office. Obviously right now we're in COVID, but beyond COVID, having meetings, trying to schedule, even if it's once a year, where you're actually going to the district office, or if you're able to make it to Washington, D.C. to your federal representatives, but show up, you know, make sure that they know that you exist and that you are watching their moves and watching their votes.
Thanks so much for that, Sister Linda. Speaking truth to power is, I think, probably one of the most important parts about organizing, which you have an incredible resume of and experience doing. And part of that is sharing that experience with other groups. Atlanta was the birthplace of the civil rights movement, and we're in the midst of another movement today. In your experiences organizing, what tactics or practices have you seen that have been most impactful, particularly in minority communities, but across communities? And then what are some less successful methods, and what are the reasons why those methods were less successful? I think that's going to be incredible for you to share with us.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that question as well. One of the things about our organizing work is that you have to have the right tactics. You have to be able to understand that this is not just about us. And the way that I move in this work, I move in this movement, is that I have to sit and decide when I'm engaging in an electoral campaign, how many people am I helping and how many people am I hurting? That's what I think about. You know, I see electoral politics as a tool in our larger toolbox that we have to engage and organize our communities. I also understand that there are no perfect candidates. There's never going to be a perfect candidate. So if you're waiting for somebody to run for Congress or run for president or run for whatever office, governor, lieutenant governor, it's never going to happen. You're never going to have someone who's going to believe or hold all the same positions that you have. You have to sit and have rational conversations. We cannot be a 1 or 2 or 3 issued community. It doesn't work. And we have this idea that there are issues that are Muslim issues and there are issues that are not Muslim issues. Every issue is a Muslim issue. Healthcare, transportation, infrastructure, climate justice, immigration, immigrant rights, national security, military, you name the issue, policing, criminal justice reform. Every issue is a Muslim issue. Reproductive rights are a Muslim issue. So we have to understand that we cannot and we do not live single issue lives. So we cannot have single issue struggles. And as long as we understand that also that our freedom is bound up with the freedom of other communities, and we organize in that way to build power, because we the Muslims are not enough. You are not enough. There are only 3 to 5 million Muslims in America. You are not enough. But when you add your voice to other marginalized people and we build that political and powerful voice, trust me, we will see alleviation of suffering. We will see us gain back more rights. You will see us protect the rights that we already have. So being intersectional, not being self-righteous, engaging on an intergenerational level, engaging across ideology. You know, in our Muslim community, we're not a monolith. We have conservative Muslims, we have progressive, or whatever you want to call them, you know, more not too religious Muslims, I guess you can call them. We have young people and old people, immigrants and indigenous. We just have to figure out how to find a universal message that brings our community together.
Absolutely. Any last messages for Georgia Muslims heading off to the polls to vote on January 5th?
I'll probably be coming to a door near you. I'm talking to you here I'm actually living in Marietta, Georgia. I just got back today. Unfortunately, I had a death in the family, so I had to leave for a few days, and I came back here to Georgia. Sisters and brothers, I'm telling Georgia Muslims this. I'm not asking you to be me. I'm not asking you to move and leave your family to organize in another state. I'm putting it all on the line, just as the people at CAIR are, just as the people at the Georgia Muslim Voter Project are. You have the power to swing this election. The bottom line, don't talk to me about any other communities. You, the Muslim American community in Georgia, by yourselves can literally swing this entire election and send 2 Democrats to the U.S. Senate, which makes Kamala Harris the deciding vote. And you can actually alleviate harm and suffering on millions of immigrants in this country, particularly on the issue of immigration reform, on issues of climate change. I mean, the planet is dying, folks. Even if you win justice and there's no planet, it's not going to work. So I'm telling Georgia Muslim voters, please, please go out to vote. Our friends and my colleagues here already told you early voting starts tomorrow. Don't wait till next week, the week after that, till January 5th. I'm telling you, I came from a funeral of my 34-year-old cousin. You may not live till tomorrow or the week after that. We don't know. make a commitment and take your mother, your father, your grandmother, whoever you can. Don't go alone. Take a group of you and go to the polls and let us make history together and let the story be told. On January 5th, 2021, it is the Muslim American community, the votes from the Muslim American community in Georgia that literally helped us win back that Senate and put us back on a path towards winning justice for our communities. Assalamu alaikum, and I'll see some of you at the doors. I'll be wearing a mask, so you might not recognize me, but it'll be me at your door.
Inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi raji'un. Our deepest condolences and dua for you and your family, Sister Linda. Thank you so much for lending your voice and your efforts to us here in Georgia and inspiring us and the organizers here on the ground. We're looking forward to seeing you here
and
at the
very
doors.
soon.
Sounds good. Thank you again so much for joining us. Now, for all our viewers, we're incredibly excited to invite our next guest, Representative Ilhan Omar, to the conversation. Representative Ilhan Omar represents Minnesota's 5th Congressional District in the United States House of Representatives, which includes Minneapolis and surrounding suburbs. An experienced Twin Cities policy analyst, organizer, public speaker, and advocate, Representative Omar was sworn into office in January 2019, making her the first Somali American member of Congress, the first woman of color to represent Minnesota, and one of the first 2 Muslim American women, the second of which was also on our show earlier today, elected to Congress. Representative Omar repeated her resounding electoral victory of 2018 once more in 2020. Congratulations, Representative Omar, on your most recent electoral win. We're so thrilled to have you on today to speak to the Georgia Muslim community.
I am delighted to be here with you all. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. And I think, we've had you here in Georgia. We've had the good fortune of having you visit our great state as being part of our gala. You've got to meet a lot of the Georgia Muslim community. So, that there's some shared facets. The Georgia Muslim community has one of the largest refugee populations in the world, or in the country. Clarkston, Georgia is called the Ellis Island of the South. An incredibly large and rich and diverse Somali American community lives there. And so particular to that and how we've been advancing this conversation in voter suppression tactics and civic engagement, I really wanted to ask you, Congresswoman, with a specific Somali refugee population in your state, what challenges have you faced in mobilizing your community to vote, particularly as it relates to the hurdles that are institutionally placed on them by legislatures?
Well, thank you. I mean, it's always fun to visit Georgia. Before I came to the gala, I had many opportunities to visit the state and be with the Somali community in Georgia. It is quite fascinating to see the different places we all ended up in as Somali diaspora. I think oftentimes there are great opportunities that sort of come out of challenges that we face. And in Minnesota in 2016, we have caucuses like they do in Iowa. The caucuses are made famous in Iowa, but in Minnesota, we also have caucuses. And as we were preparing for the caucuses, the Republicans started putting out flyers that said that Muslims were coming to infiltrate the democracy, and they had to do everything that everything possible to make sure that we weren't infiltrating. And to us, that was a direct challenge to see, right, whether we were going to allow that hate, division, and fear to stop us from participating, or whether we were going to show up in ways we've never shown up before. And as many of you know, Minnesota has now had the highest turnout in the country, I think second time, 18 and 2020. And we have had the Somali participation has been at like 98% electorally. We have elected myself to the State House in that year. We now have 2 Somali representatives in the Minnesota House. We have a Somali senator. I represent Minnesota in Congress. And we have so many Somalis representing us on municipal levels, whether it is on city councils, on school boards, on county boards. And I tell you that as an example because it is really important for us to recognize that when people tell us that we are not to participate, it is incumbent on us to recognize that they have no right to that participation. And they have no right to deny us that participation. And so for us as Somalis in Minnesota, we recognize that. And we said, well, I am entitled to participate as you are. So I am going to show up to the caucuses. I'm going to show up to vote. I'm going to invite my friends and my family. And I'm actually going to run for office and represent you in these positions. And as Muslims, I know that, you know, since 9/11, so many of us have risen up and said, you know, you might push us to live on the margins of society. You might vilify us and you might silence us. But we internally are going to fight against that. And we're going to show up and participate in ways that nobody really expected us to. And I know that the election results on November 3rd were due to Muslim participation in Georgia. Georgia made history this last election cycle because everybody decided that it was important for them to respond to the hatred that the Republicans and Trump were spewing with their vote. And we now have an opportunity to do that again in this runoff elections in the Senate, because progress for our country runs through Georgia, right? All eyes are on Georgia. People recognize that it is one thing to feel the relief of having a new president come in on January 20th. But we need actual relief that comes with progress. And that progress is not going to be possible unless we are able to legislate that progress. And we can't legislate that progress unless we have a Senate that is willing to work on behalf of progress in this country.
Thank you. And before we move on to our next question, I just wanted to personally thank you for being here. My dad was a refugee from Uganda, and he settled in Hopkins, Minnesota, which is where I was born. So I have a special place for Minnesota in my heart.
You're everywhere.
Absolutely. So what are some reasons for minority communities to engage? And have you seen a change in your community as a result of increased engagement in the democratic process?
Oh, certainly. I mean, I think the clearest example is my predecessor, Congressman Keith Ellison. You know, when he got elected to Congress in 2006, that actual representation for our community meant that so many of us could aspire to run for office and be ourselves and authentically show up as ourselves, pushing for progress in the ways in which we saw fit. And, you know, when he decided to retire from Congress and run for Attorney General, I remember so many people being afraid of what it meant for us to lose him in Congress and what it could mean if he lost his seat. I remember telling someone, you know, I'm more terrified of Keith losing than I am terrified of me losing my election, because for so many of us, it meant the ability to have someone who was going to be a lawyer on behalf of us in Minnesota. And we've now seen that actually take place with the murder of George Floyd. If we did not have an attorney general like Keith Ellison, if all of us did not show up to back him and support him and vote for him, we would not have the kind of trajectory that case has now had in possibly getting justice for George Floyd. So there is tangible results that come from actual participation in our democracy. And as many people say, elections have consequences. So many people didn't come out and vote in 2016. We ended up having Trump as our president. And the last 4 years have lived with the insult and assault that came from his rhetoric and his policies of hate. And now we get to see the consequences of an election with the 2020 election, with having a president that talks about creating a more perfect union, a president that is willing to work on behalf of all Americans, a president who is not going to vilify particular segments of our society because they are not of the same faith as him or of the same ethnicity as him. And so, when I hear people say, I don't have a place in voting, it's as if they are saying, I don't want to have a voice. Because our vote is our voice, and participating in a democratic process allows our voice to be at that table where we are not just going to be talked about, but we are part of the conversation.
Congresswoman, thank you so much. And I'm just going to raise this because I've got a few comments in the chat. CAIR and Georgia Muslim Voter Project are both 501c3, so we are nonpartisan, and we're not endorsing or supporting any candidate. I think what the Congresswoman has said is something that we absolutely would stress. There's this point that elections have consequences, and Congresswoman, you said so eloquently that people need to make their voices heard. So regardless of whoever you support, in a swing state, your vote is going to matter. Your vote is going to turn an election. And so I absolutely want to, echo your thoughts that you said much more eloquently than I am right now, but I appreciate that.
So I'll just say this: in Iowa, we now have a representative, a member of Congress, who won with, I think, two dozen votes. In Minnesota, I used to serve with a member of the Minnesota House who won with 19 votes. And so, right, like participation makes a difference on who gets to represent you. And you don't want, like Rashida talks about her voting block. There's herself and 14 of her siblings, and they could actually swing an election if they all came out. And I know as Muslims, we all come from large families. So make sure you're taking your whole family and you're helping them create a vote plan where they're connecting to their network as well.
Absolutely. And on that front, I mean, not just in voting and civic engagement in general, lobbying, we, part of our Immigrant Rights Coalition, have been able to defeat bills literally by one vote. The first major immigrant rights bill that CAIR-Georgia worked against to defend Georgia Muslims against, we defeated by one vote. And there were at least 6 people I spoke to that day that hadn't heard about it and that voted no after speaking with us. So your voice matters. Your being heard matters. And so, Congresswoman, on the last thing, I really want to thank you for your time and the great message you've given us. Is any last message you have for the Georgia Muslim community and Georgia Muslims ahead of this runoff? We know early voting starts tomorrow, so any last messages you have before we start early voting?
I mean, I'll just echo what my sister Linda Sarsour was saying earlier. Building relationships is a valued part of being a member of a society. You want to build relationships with these candidates as you support their run. You want to continue to build relationships with them as they represent you. And you want to build relationships with the people you live with in your society because there are going to be those moments where you are going to need that one vote to make a decision on a policy, whether we're killing it or we want it to move forward, right? In Minnesota right now, in my city of Minneapolis, we're reimagining policing and public safety. And it was a relationship that I had with a city council member that ended up being the deciding factor in whether we were going to see progress or not. And those relationships matter, and making sure that you are not only participating but staying engaged and informed as a citizen is also valuable. You shouldn't only call when others are asking you to call. You should be informing yourself and being the one that is asking others to call. And as Muslims, we constantly are dealing with an environment where our civil liberties are being challenged, where our human rights are being violated, where our dignity is under assault, where our humanity isn't uplifted. And so showing up, being bold and aggressive is an important part of asserting our citizenship, asserting our place in society, asserting our voice, and asserting our principles and values as Muslims in this country. And so I do hope that when the election is decided on January 5th, and people are able to analyze who came out and voted, we will hear that the Muslims in Georgia were a big part of making the right decision in this historic election.
Thank you, Representative Omar. And we know you're busy, so we appreciate you and are so grateful for you being here today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
To close out our conversation tonight, we have Imam Suhaib Webb. Imam Suhaib is a graduate of the University of Central Oklahoma with a background in education and Azhar University from the College of Sharia. Imam Suhaib has served various communities in North America and is currently the founder of Suhaib Webb Institute of Sacred Sciences. He currently resides in New York, serving as scholar in residence at the Islamic Center at NYU. He is known for engaging youth and young adult Muslims through creative use and accessibility through social media. Imam Suhaib, let's discuss the Islamic perspective on civic engagement. Is it a religious obligation for Muslims to be civically engaged?
So ideally, it's a communal obligation, which means enough of us have to do it so the rest of us don't have to. But depending on the situation locally, when I actually converted to Islam, and one of the reasons I converted is that there was a big upheaval about a mosque being built in my city, and that actually got my attention. So depending on the situation and the optics, it could either be a communal obligation or in certain circumstances, an individual obligation. Allah says, "Wala taktumu shahada," right? Don't hide your witness. And we have a very important principle in Islamic law that says, "Ma la yutimul wajib illa bi ada'ihi fahuwa wajib," that whatever helps us complete an obligation becomes an obligation. So how many obligations are we protecting and preserving by civic engagement, right? Our ability to worship freely, to protect our communities from others. We see now what appears to be an example of where law and order actually, right, maintained the status quo, maintained this election, but there are still attempts to undermine it. And the people that are trying to undermine this election are the same people who have lied about our communities, vilified our communities, demonized our communities in ways that have really harmed us. And the way that we have been able to push back has been through civic engagement and relationship building and community organizing.
Thank you so much, Imam Suhaib. Imam Suhaib, I just want to say I'm very excited to have you here with us. We've had you in Georgia before, so I know you know the Georgia community very well, but it's always a pleasure to hear from you.
as well. It's great to be with you guys. And you know, there's actually a beautiful hadith about this where the Prophet mentioned that our role as a community are like people that are on the top of a boat and people at the bottom are asking for water, and people at the top of the boat continue to ignore them, and finally the people at the bottom drill a hole and everybody sinks. So our participation, not only is it allowing us to define our community, I think that Ilhan, Representative Omar, Andre Carlson, I think Linda, so many of our important, wonderful community members are also defining who we are. We have to understand that Islamophobia is really about defining who we are as a community. And one of the definitions that has always been pushed out there is that we are undomesticated citizens, that we are unable to stick to the laws of the land, that we are incapable of participating in the political process. And now we see that all this is, as Malcolm talked about, chickens coming home to roost. Who are the unlawful now? Who are the people who are not willing to abide by? Now there's talk today on Parler of secession and civil war in the face of Friday's Supreme Court verdict. So we have to be involved in order to stake our claim and definitions of who we are. One of our teachers used to say to us that an empty chair can't speak for you. And you know, the first thing that God taught Adam was how to name things, definitions. So even if we lose certain elections that we may participate in, Representative Omar brilliantly talked about, but what you learn, the relationships that you build, the placing and positing of your community in the light that you want it to be placed in, all comes out through participation and engagement, and also allows us to protect our fellow citizens who may not be Muslim from the dangers of power and the encroachment of oppression, right? So we're not only looking out for ourselves, we're looking out for others. And all those things are like religiously obligatory.
And the hadith, I think, is well taken. And I'm going to add just a line from, you know, one of my favorite poems, "And Still We Rise," in terms of the ship. So how can our religious leadership cultivate higher civic engagement within our communities?
Well, I think our religious leadership has a serious problem in America. We find that Muslim leadership is either compromised politically, whether it be from overseas. We find certain Muslim religious leaders are playing with the far right in ways that have to be extremely concerning. We find some religious leaders even on the far left that may be concerning. And I think it's extremely important that the Muslim community in America begins to define what are its political negotiables and non-negotiables, and then begins to stake out some kind of national identity. I don't think we've done that. And for that reason, we find, you know, some Muslims actually buying in, and I say this as a member of a for-profit entity, not a non-profit entity, buying into like the whole Trump spiel on immigration. Even Muslims who have relatives overseas, right? You know, that's kind of insane. But I think there is a great hope in Generation Z who are not scared, who wandered in the desert for 40 years and have come out of this kind of corporate hatred that is the Islamophobia industry took advantage of, especially after 2001. They're not scared. And I'm hopeful that Generation Z Muslims will be able to create a set of non-negotiables and negotiables around where we stand politically, that we can then hold religious leadership responsible for. It's very difficult now to hold one another responsible based on where we sit politically. So I think that, you know, Tavis Smiley, I think in the early 2000s, would have this kind of meeting of the Black church, and he would facilitate a conversation between many important people. I would like to see, this is what like ICNA and MAS and ICNA could do at these large conventions perhaps, is to have like a conversation with who's who within the activist community, within religious scholarship, academics, just common folks that are out there that are impacted by political decisions, and begin to work on a grammar and a language that allows us to hold one another's feet to the fire. Because what we're seeing is like back and forth and constant kind of fighting, but we don't have a framework for political activism in this country. Outside of the great work Imam Dawood Wali out of Detroit wrote a book on kind of sacred resistance. You know, one of the activists told me my political theory is this. I asked him, what's your political theology? He said, I don't have a political theology. What is the American Muslim political theology? We don't have that. So I think that we have a number of religious leaders who are on different spectrums politically, And without the community crafting a set of definitions, what are the negotiables, what are the non-negotiables, what are our positions on certain issues, for the most part, everyone's not going to agree. But for the most part, and then being able to nicely, right, hold people accountable, to try to guide people to why these positions are important as a community and to each other, then I think we can see that. But right now, there tends to be a lack of clarity on, at least internationally and nationally, where we stand politically. To the extent that we can hold each other accountable and teach each other. There's a set of assumptions, but I don't think that there's a clear platform for the Muslims for, say, the next 20, 30, 40 years.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And before we close out our conversations tonight, do you have any last thoughts or messages for Muslims in Georgia?
Yeah, I mean, Georgia is kind of the new Bay Area, right? Georgia is kind of the new Dallas. This is where now it's like, this is the place to be as a Muslim, mashallah. I live in New York City, and I know that, you know, a massive number of New Yorkers, even, you know, before COVID-19, had migrated to the Black Mecca, as people in Brooklyn like to call it, to Georgia, and Atlanta in particular. So I think that you guys are in a very important position strategically. You are at the forefront of a lot of great work that's happening in defining the future of America. The old South is meeting the new South in Georgia. And we're seeing this start to happen in places like Texas, and even places like in Oklahoma, where I'm from, where a Muslim woman was recently elected. So I think that your participation in this up and coming, I believe it's the runoffs for senator, are extremely important. It's going to dictate so many things that impact us as a community explicitly, and the rest of the country implicitly. So I really hope that you will canvass, that you'll organize. I know us, and I was listening to Representative Omar, was the relationships of help we extended to partners. So we would walk into places and offer to canvass for candidates who our community liked. We would walk into places and ask, for example, our local city councilman, Tito Jackson, like, what can we do to help you make our city better? And those relationships, when the Boston bombing happened, came back to help us, because those people knew by how we engaged and worked for the betterment of the whole community. So I really hope that you guys will passionately, tomorrow I think is the first day of voting in this runoff. I hope you guys will get out, work hard, canvass for politicians who are our allies, support the work that they do, and make sure that you vote for those people who have the best interest of our community and our country in mind.
Jazakallah. Thank you so much, Imam Suhaib Webb, for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you on. Always a pleasure to have you speak to the Georgia Muslim community.
Absolutely.
Thank you again for joining us.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Well, alhamdulillah. Thank you to all our guests, to all our speakers, and to our audience, you, the viewers, the Georgia Muslim community, for joining us for our first virtual vote-a-thon. I think this was an incredible event tonight. Shafina, I had a pleasure hosting this with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. No, it was incredible. I feel so energized, and I really hope that everyone out there watching is feeling that energy too.
For sure. And we want you to stay on for a few more moments. We do have a few other things that we want to make sure we cover. Our speakers did a great job in energizing us, rejuvenating us, making sure that the Georgia Muslim community is ready to go out and vote, or to apply for absentee ballot and drop it off in a drop-off box. You're going to be getting a lot of information from us, but Shafina, I know we have some key information we can provide right now for you at home.
Absolutely. So just a reminder that early voting again starts tomorrow and runs through December 31st. Again, we encourage you to drop your ballots in a drop box if you can, just to ensure that it doesn't get lost in the mail. But if you do have to mail it, we do recommend that you mail those in by December 21st to make sure that it reaches in time. If you don't vote early, vote on January 5th. And if you ever have questions, we are both on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Send us a DM. We're happy to answer any questions you have.
And we're going to have, inshallah, some future webinars, maybe not as regular as our first phase, because we put out a lot of informative information for all of you that is still relevant, but it'll still be posted and reposted. So please do follow us on Facebook, on Instagram. Georgia Muslim Voter Project puts out some incredible graphics. So does our team at CAIR-Georgia. So please do follow us. That's how you'll get access to it first, and you'll see it first, and you'll be able to share it on your story as well. But I really do want to just thank everyone in the community once again for joining us and taking the whole time out to spend with us. It was a pleasure being your host for tonight. And before we close off, we're going to bring back Munir to help us close completely. But from my end, Jazakallah so much for for spending this evening with us, for listening to our speakers, for being a part of the discussion. And this is just the beginning. There's a lot of work for us.
Absolutely,
everyone.
Thank you, Murtaza and Shafina, so much for hosting such a wonderful night. Thank you to CAIR and Georgia Muslim Voter Project for the work that you do. As we were talking about earlier, we are here thanks to those who came before us, and we all stand on the shoulders of giants. But it is on us. It is our responsibility to make sure that organizations like this can continue and make sure that our voices are heard, make sure that we have a seat at the table, and make sure that our values and morals and ethics and thoughts are being listened to, but also our representatives are being held accountable. For those of you organizing, I know this work is tiring and exhausting and can feel lonely. And I hope that tonight you are all energized and know that there is a large family here to surround you and send you love and energy. I think that was the key word for tonight. I think we're all energized to go out, get out there, make sure that our brothers and sisters are voting, make sure that our neighbors are voting, make sure that our family is voting, because our voice needs to be heard and it should be heard. I hope all of you will join me in supporting and in amplifying Georgia Muslim Voter Project and CAIR so they can continue to do these wonderful events like tonight. Don't forget, early voting starts tomorrow, December 14th. The election is on January 5th. A lot of the United States and around the world is writing on this election, and you have an opportunity to be part of history. So I hope that all of you will get out there. I hope all of you are energized and will continue to come back as a community and as a large family. Thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and salam alaikum.